Real people, real opinions.
Real Talk Radio, the multi-award winning Niall Boylan Show.
Ireland's classic hits.
It's a shocking figure when you think that 1 in 5 pregnancies, or 1 in 5 women actually, that's probably more than 1 in 5 pregnancies because some women will have multiple miscarriages. It's a shocking figure that 1 in 5. Now, again, I don't want to frighten people off getting pregnant because 4 in 5 are healthy pregnancies. But even that 1 in 5 is a terrible figure, isn't it? Now, we are getting better at understanding miscarriage. And generally, I think the answer and the reason why women have miscarriages is their body just isn't ready to have a baby. I think that's probably the simplistic answer for it, and most doctors will tell you that. It's just not the right time for you to be pregnant. Your body isn't in a good, healthy state maybe at that particular time, or something just isn't quite right. And it's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's just nature. So we want to know if you've been in that situation. How was that time for you? How difficult was that time for you? And what's the right thing for people to say when they know you? Because that's the stigma around this, and there shouldn't be a stigma. We don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about miscarriage. We don't talk about menopause. We don't talk about periods. There's all this kind of stigma around all of these things, stillbirths. You know, so when you meet somebody who you knew was pregnant, but you haven't seen them in maybe a year, but you had met them when they were, say, 2 months pregnant, and you haven't seen them in ages, and then you realise they're not pregnant anymore, but you kind of have heard through the grapevine they might have lost the baby. Do you kind of say, oh, sorry about your loss, or do you say nothing and just not bring up the subject just in case it makes them all sad? Or what do you do in that situation? I want to know what you think. The number, by the way, as usual, 087 188 0008. Maybe you are a woman who's had a miscarriage. And by the way, I don't want to ignore men here as well, because although physically the miscarriage is a huge loss to a woman as well, emotionally the miscarriage is a huge loss to the father of the child in most cases, where the father is around or on the scene. It's a huge loss to him too, because both parents really wanted that baby. And, well, I would like to think they did anyway. And that would be a huge loss. So it's 087 188 0008. Rosie, I think it is. Hi, Rosie. Hello?
Hi.
Hi, Rosie.
Hi.
How are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good. Rosie, miscarriage is something that we really don't talk about an awful lot. And people who've never experienced it know very little about it because we don't talk about it.
Yeah, well, first off, I have to say that, like, you know, to any woman or man, it's a terrific experience, not just to a woman, but also to a parent, you know, to a father, you know?
Yeah.
I've gone, I don't even know how to explain this, but my mom had a miscarriage and she fostered me, and my dad, unfortunately, like, you know, didn't really know about it. But I'm like, you know, it's just a traumatic experience. Like,
yeah.
I was very, 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 I suppose anyone that's listening in, like, I was very grateful, like, to be fostered with my mother, and like my mother obviously miscarried a kid, and it's like it's just like, say, you know, what do you do? Like, it's very traumatic experience.
Well, I was in the same position as you. My mother miscarried, and that's why I was adopted. So because
you were adopted as well.
Yeah, so I was adopted. My mother had
situation.
multiple miscarriages, and because she then was afraid to continue getting pregnant, I was adopted.
Yeah, and like my mom like miscarried, and she obviously fostered me, my brothers, had that life, and it's like it's such a traumatic experience that like you just kind of, like, I see my mom lives with it, and you just kind of like go, it's such a hard experience, like, you know, and I've seen it with my mom, and like anyone that's out there, it's kind of like going, it's heartfelt, it's traumatic. Again, that's the word I use.
Yeah.
Counseling, therapy, I don't know, like, it's just a really heartfelt situation.
Well, it's for couples who want their baby, which I assume are most couples who want their baby, you know, it's the loss of a baby. It's not just, you know, a pregnancy ending or something like that, or you know, for it's the loss of a child. You know, it's a child that they've expected to come into their life. You know,
I know.
and they may have made preparations for that. They may have got a baby room ready, and I don't know, some people do things like that, I suppose, in the early days. You know, so they're welcoming this little child into the world, and all of a sudden, this child is no more, and that the grieving process behind that must be awful.
Yeah, like it's just a grieving process, isn't it? And it's like, and I actually I have to say, my sister-in-law just had a baby yesterday.
Congratulations to her.
Yeah, I know. I'm an auntie again, but I'm kind of screwed because I'm like 7 kids now, like for Christmas. So
Oh, yeah.
that's a lot more presents.
Yeah.
A lot more presents.
Every time you're an auntie, it's costing you more money.
Every time you're an auntie, you're like going, "Oh, here we go again now." Like
Yeah.
there's
another 50 quid. Yeah.
There's another. Well, actually, I don't know. Like probably another 100 quid because
Yeah.
they're spoiled and they're like, oh, we want this and we want that, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to like check my bank balance. But no, it is definitely, I have to say, a traumatic kind of thing that happens, and you know, I don't know how to say it or vouch for something, but like my real mom, like, you know, could have been like a kind of a case where I could have been like miscarried or aborted or whatever it is. But
Yeah.
like children are children. But like it's
Well, here's the thing,
it's a
right? If you were to look at anything,
heartfelt.
yeah, if you were to look at anything good that came out of it, and if you want to say that anything good came out of it, the good that came out of it was that you were given a loving home, and that was the good that came out of it. You know.
Yeah, I have to say I was given a very good loving home and just loved, and like as you said, you were adopted, so you know you're given a loving home and you do your best. And obviously you are on the radio. I've done nursing, and you know I'm doing everything that I can do. But yeah, it's a heartfelt situation for anyone that's miscarried, because you do feel empathetically sorry for someone. You do feel like sad.
Yep.
Empathy. What other word can you
What's the right
Empathy.
thing to do, by the way? When I mean, I don't know if I'm sure you know people who have had a miscarriage. But
Oh, of course, yeah. I know.
Do you talk to them about it, or do you just avoid the subject?
Of course. No, I don't. No, not at all. You can't.
Yeah.
Like everything in life at the moment, like you don't avoid the subject. You can't like I think anything in life at the moment.
Yeah.
You can't avoid any subject. You have to
Talk.
And it's not just about females. It's about males as well.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's not just a woman that's lost a child. It's a dad that's lost a child.
Yeah.
And you have to talk about it. And I think way forward is like talk.
Yeah. And I know
If it's not
by the way, it can also be very difficult for a couple. You know, a relationship can go through a lot of strain and a lot of stress at a time like that. You know?
Yeah.
Because they're looking for answers. They're looking for answers. They want to know why, you know, and then there's a fear of getting pregnant again. You know, how long will this one last? Will I have another miscarriage? Because it is quite common to have a second miscarriage. It can happen. You know, when I say quite common, less common than having the first one, but obviously it can be common again to have a second miscarriage.
Yeah, and I've had one or two friends that have lost kids. And like when we had my friend lost a baby. I have to say it was really sad, because thank God, all I can say is thank God that they managed to survive and get through it.
Yeah.
And they managed to get through it, and they did have another child, and the child is now like 3. And how they got through that relationship, focused on their marriage, was like phenomenal. But you just have to survive, and if it's going to, I don't know, if it's going to counselling or whatever it is for me, I'm just like, you just got to talk. Like everyone, and I don't know who's listening to the show tonight, but you gotta talk, because I think in this life you have to talk, because if you don't talk, then the world's a disaster.
Well, that's why we're all here tonight, Rosie, and that's why it's a talk show, because I think it's important that people listen to other people talking and their experiences. Stay there, Rosie, just for a second, because you mentioned, obviously, the dads too.
Yeah.
And Andy, hi, how are you?
How's it going?
How you doing? Andy, you went through this with your wife.
Yeah, 36 years ago now.
Yeah.
And back in those days, it was very much, we had gotten married. Same year we got married, we found we were expecting. And yeah, it wasn't something we had planned. We thought, oh, grand. Well, look, we had hoped for a few more years before we decided, but look, it was what it was.
Yeah.
It was very exciting, and we had the whole thing of deciding we'd wait till a certain period of time to tell people. Everyone was happy, delighted. In your head, you try not to go there, but you do always go to, well, what this baby will be like. The whole vision of that child is in your head, and right the whole way through. It's not just as a baby; it's right through school, how they're going to be brilliant, whatever have you.
What they're going to do for a living. Yeah.
I know it's a fantasy, but it's your fantasy.
No, it's lovely, isn't it?
And
yeah.
It's just basically it's the word expecting. It is really, you're expecting something. So we just had a situation one night. My wife just wasn't feeling well. We said, look, we'll go to the.
How many weeks pregnant was she at that stage, by the way?
About 4.5 months or thereabouts.
Wow. Okay.
And so there was a problem, and we said, look, we'll go. And it was dealt very matter of factly. It was into the hospital. A procedure was followed, and we're told, look, the baby's gone, blah, blah, blah.
Oh,
it
no.
would have been blah, blah, blah. And that was it. It was no, go home. And everyone said the same thing, from the people in the hospital, from the doctors, from everybody, family, everyone. They don't know how to talk about it. So the only thing that says, I'm sure you'll have another one. And thank God, 6 years later, we do have our 2 children. We have this year a grandchild, a grandson. So yes, it has, time will heal. But Mary is the baby we called her. She would have been 36 today, or not today, but this year. And we just think, what could her life have been? So, but the only people that talk about this really are me and my wife. We talk about it still when we feel like it. We never avoided talking about it to each other.
And what do you remember birthdays and things like that? Have you given it a date that it would have been born?
We would more remember the date of when
of the
things
miscarriage.
happened.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. We wouldn't necessarily go through. We decided that ourselves. Now, what we did do, and it was just for us ourselves, we felt that we wanted to dedicate the baby as a baby because of our belief. And so we said a prayer, and we said, just between me and you and God, we thank you for the opportunity. We thank you for what happened. And we trust that in our sense, now it's not for everybody, but for us, we said, look, we trust that for some reason,
it was the right thing to happen.
This has happened.
Yeah.
This has happened for some reason. So we just went that way. But the thing is, it was amazing to me how there was no phone call afterwards from anybody, from hospitals, from doctors, from anybody to say, how are you coping, lads? Or is it, how you? There was nothing, literally nothing. And I felt for my wife because of that, not so much for me. But afterwards, I kind of thought, there was 2 of us in this. And if it hadn't been for her way of talking to me, I would have found it very difficult to deal with. She was so considerate of me because she allowed me to say things I needed to say.
I mean, that was tough. That was halfway through a pregnancy.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. She allowed me to say to her, how I was feeling. And
Yeah, because you don't, I mean, the way I can only imagine. It's your wife. She's just lost a baby, and you don't want to be telling her that you feel down because you kind of feel a bit selfish doing that. Because you think to yourself, I mean, gosh, she feels worse than I do, so I better not tell her I feel down. You know what I mean? So
it turned out that it is funny in saying this, but a trouble shared is a trouble to have, kind of thing. It literally was. We depended on each other, and it was the first year of our marriage, and it made such a difference to how we dealt with each other. We became, in a sense, people that, it didn't matter how you were feeling, it was okay to say it, you know. And that's the thing I'd love to say to people. If you're feeling a certain way, it's okay to say it. You don't have to wallow in it. You don't have to, but it's definitely okay to have somewhere safe to say it. And if the safe person you say it is the person who's been through it with you, that can help. But I would like it to be more discussed or more acceptable to discuss it. I had a very strange one that years and years and years later, somebody mentioned to me in passing that, you know, he was feeling particularly bad that day because of X, Y, Z. And it turned out he had the same situation. We sat down, had a cup of tea and talked it through. And it was amazing how similar
That's
our
what I'm
story
saying.
was.
And that's what Rosie is saying. We need to talk. We all need to talk about these things.
Yeah. As I said, people find it difficult. I mean, we are still talking about, let's put it as it is, we are still talking about the death of expectation.
Do you still
So
talk?
it is kind of.
Sorry, Rosie?
Yeah, it is, you know.
No, I was just going to say to, like,
Andy.
Andy, do you still talk?
Do we still talk?
Do you talk?
To each other about
it's
it?
not like, I wouldn't say still talk, because that would be, if I mentioned, it's like, do you talk?
About the miscarriage, you mean?
Yeah, you talk about it.
Oh, you still,
Yes,
30 years later, yeah.
It would happen in it's almost like the as I call them the waves of grief that you find for any situation like that. It becomes one of the things that you go through and so you experience. And so certain things will remind me, and certain.
And by the way, can I ask you? And I hope I know this is going to upset you. I know it was a long time ago, but still, you know, the memory is always still there, and the grief is always still there. But after that happened, I'm assuming it puts a stress on a relationship. Of course it does, because they always say, by the way, the loss of a child can put a stress.
Do you know the thing I found most, to be honest with you, Niall, is the fear. The fear the next time we were pregnant.
Yes.
My God, I was nearly incapable of keeping my manliness, if you want to put it that way, together for my wife.
Yeah.
I was so afraid.
I know. I spoke to a girl recently who I know had a miscarriage, and thankfully she had a very healthy baby a year or two later.
Yeah.
But she told me in her second pregnancy, that fear that she had every time she felt a twinge.
And,
you know,
and I understand that from the woman's point of view, and that is, but you're expected. Like you grew up the same time I did. We're the same age. I'm 59 now. You're around the same, aren't you?
60.
Roughly?
Yeah, I'm 60. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we were brought up in an age where men didn't show any kind of weakness, and if you did show any emotion, that was a big thing. Like, and so you had to behave a certain way. But at the same token, you were so afraid for what might happen, at what you'd have to go through again, because you've already gone through it. And though you weren't feeling, you had none of the pain, you had none of the, there was definitely those moments where you kind of, you know, if certain things were said, and I don't mean to be indelicate here, like someone would say, oh, you know, they're spotting, and you're like, oh, that word, you know, means completely different. No, you go to
which is quite normal during a pregnancy, but I know,
But you go, Braxton Hicks, you go and you talk to that, to let's say a general bloke, he's kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, but the thing is, you get so tuned in because you're.
You almost become an expert. Yeah, but the other thing too, just before I go to Kathleen and Andy, I wanted to ask you was the people that you knew and your friends, your colleagues, your workmates, whatever, who knew you were pregnant, you and your missus were pregnant. Mm-hmm. What was their reaction? You know, did they kind of avoid the conversation and just kind of go, better not say anything to him, he's already in a bad way? Or did they approach you and say sorry and talk to you about it?
Some said nothing at all. Others would say, sorry for your news. But that was it. One or two would say, do you need anything? But there were the very few white people. But it was kind of, you were left to deal with it. And as I say, I hope it's better now. But you were
I would
left
imagine, I hope it is better. Well, I think the hospitals are certainly better at dealing with it now.
Yeah.
And I know the law is, by the way, because, for example, if you have a stillbirth or miscarriage, anytime over 24 weeks of pregnancy now, you're entitled, and the birth weight is at least 500 grams, which is a half a kilo. You're entitled to full maternity leave. This means that you can take the basic 26 weeks maternity leave and 16 weeks additional maternity leave. So you're entitled to maternity leave the same as a woman who has a baby once it's over 24 weeks. So you would have been in that situation probably, yeah.
Yeah. The thing to remember now, before I go, the last thing I would say to you is that I would say to anybody at all, remember, everyone has a story. Everyone has a situation. Some people who carry their child and then lose their child, people who have miscarriage. Everyone has a story. And it would be just a good thing if we opened ourselves up to letting people tell us that if they want to. You don't have to cure it. You don't have to tell them what to do. All you have to do is listen. That's it. That's all you have to do. And that gives the person, if you're listening, the opportunity to talk to you.
I would just stay there for a second because Kathleen, hi Kathleen, how are you?
Oh, hello now.
Hello Kathleen, how are you?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm not too bad now. I can't. Yeah, I'm just coming to my room because my daughter's here and she doesn't want to hear me talking about miscarriages.
Oh, okay, I can understand. I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing for a woman to go through now. You know.
Yeah.
It happened to me when my girl's 36 now.
Yeah.
And the one I have, and it happened to me when she was 5.
Okay.
But I was, I think it was 12 weeks.
Okay, so it was quite early in the pregnancy. Yeah.
Yeah, because it would have been very commonplace, a lot of women lose their babies when they're always heartbroken now.
I'd say you were.
I was, and I asked the doctor how, this was in England, and I asked the doctor, why did I lose my baby? And they said, we don't know. We don't know why you lost your baby. We don't have any answers for it.
No, they don't generally know.
Right. And then I said, well, could you tell me, could I be able to have, I was in my late 30s when I lost my baby, and could I have any more babies? And they told me no. And I said, why can't I not have any more? And he said that all my tubes were bruised from the miscarriage. So that was my story, and it was very, very hard now.
Yeah, I'm sure. So you basically had a double whammy, so to speak. You had the pain of the miscarriage and the grieving of that, and then knowing that you can't even do it again.
That's what happened, and it was terrible, hard, But I suppose in a way, at least I have one. I have one girl, handful though she is, but I do have one girl, and I thank God, that I've got her, that way when I look back at things, and but it's very, very tough, and.
And were you married? Were you married at the time, Kathleen?
I was married at the time, yeah, I was married at the time.
So it was tough on both of you then, was?
Well, he wasn't the best one. I suppose, looking back on it, some people, are you there now?
Yeah, I am, sorry, somebody else just dropped the line there.
Right, yeah. So, I suppose in a way, maybe he did think about it, but, it just, I don't know.
In other words, what you're trying to say to me, he wasn't the most supportive person in the world.
No, he wasn't. No,
I'm sorry to hear that. No.
Because
that's so important. When I listen to Andy's story too, it is so important that a couple work together through a difficult time like that. So it was more difficult for you.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, and.
But you kind of had to get straight back to it because you had a 5-year-old. You had a 5-year-old to look after as well.
Yeah. And not only that now, because for the simple reason that basically it was, how can I put it to you? I don't think he wanted a second child because I already had my daughter,
Okay, so he wasn't keen on the pregnancy anyway.
He wasn't really keen on it, but I said, come on, we haven't a little, but what's a brother or a sister? And then I found out later in life, that it probably would have been a little boy. And I named him Michael to my dad. And when I came to live in Ireland, I went into church, and they were doing some kind of a service, and I think it was in Dominic Street at the time. And I got talking to. I said, "Oh, I'm very, are you okay?" And they made friends with nice people. And I said, "No, I lost my baby," and it would have been like when I lost my baby. It would have been about a few years prior to me coming to live in Ireland. And the lady said to me, well, you know, your baby's an angel. And I said, is my baby an angel? She said, yeah, your baby's an angel.
And I know Andy's quite religious too. Andy's baby is an angel too.
You know, but
Well, hang on, sorry to cut you a little bit short there, Kathleen, because I want to get Chris in just before I go to the news as well. Oh, it was Chris's line, I think, that we dropped. Chris, are you there? Oh, what? There you go. Chris has put us on hold. Imagine that putting a radio station on hold.
Yeah, that's not very nice, is it now? But, you know, so you want to get the other person. But I think that you have your own little, at least if you just say this to yourself, okay, as a woman, I have one, but I conceived with another one, so I did conceive the baby, even though it didn't, happen to it, miscarried him, and it was a horrible operation. It was very painful. And I was on my own when I miscarried my baby. My daughter was in the next week.
I know people don't think about this. This is the really difficult part for miscarriage that people don't know about or don't talk about, is that after you have the miscarriage, you have to have what they call, I think it's called a DNC, isn't it?
A DNC, yeah. That's what,
And it's basically just to make sure there's nothing in there that would cause infection. I imagine that's the reason. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, that's what.
So that kind of adds insult to the injury already. I know maybe I'm saying the wrong way, but do you understand what I'm saying?
No,
it turns it into a biological process.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more difficult.
Yeah, I suppose. I think it's just any woman that has a miscarriage, or I think worse again now, is a woman that goes full term and the baby's dead when the baby comes out. That must be horrific. I can't even imagine what women go through when they have a stillbirth. That must be horrific, now.
Yeah. Well, listen, Kathleen, I have to go into a break, but listen, Kathleen, thank you very much indeed for sharing that, because I tell you what, and Andy, thank you very much indeed, by the way, Andy as well.
You're welcome now, and I hope it helps some other people.
That's exactly the reason I'm saying it, because there are people listening who may be going through something similar. I want them to know they're not the only person in the world that is going through that that thousands and thousands and thousands of women every single year go through something similar. It is quite a large number of women that will go through a miscarriage every single year, so you're not on your own. And I'm sure there's somebody who's gone through it. Could be a mother, could be an aunt, could be a sister that has gone through something similar that you should talk to. And Rosie, that was on earlier on, was right. You should talk to somebody. Always talk to somebody. Don't keep it into yourself. It's the worst thing you can do with any problem. Andy was right. A problem shared is a problem halved. And if you're religious, as Andy did, say a little prayer. Andy, and you know what? Even though I'm not religious and I don't believe in God, I think what Andy said was lovely. That they said a little prayer, and that little prayer was to thank God. Because, what's that old thing, that God works in mysterious ways, and there was a reason why it happened. And sometimes there can be a reason. And Kathleen is right. The doctor told her, this is not old school thinking. It's the same nowadays. Most doctors will just say to you, when you say, why did it happen to me? They don't know. In some cases, they may have some idea. But in most cases, they don't know. It's just your body just isn't ready to have a baby. But the next time you get pregnant, you may sail through it. You just might sail through it and be fine. I've got some messages here. Okay. Hi, my ex and I experienced this when we were in our early 20s. We lost our daughter, Rebecca, at 25 weeks gestation. It was so confusing and terrifying, and I never found a good way to grieve for her. Hence the confusion, which lingers to this day, since 2002. Personally speaking, religion can affect how we grieve. You will either blame it or use it to make sense of it all. An example of being our Rebecca, and how the Catholic Universal Church denied us the use of the church for her funeral. This is a fact of the subject that I'm surprised no one brought up. I imagine all experiences at some babies are perfect at 25 weeks. They are just not fat at that time, I think is the word that you put there. I won't come on. I just want to reach out and share our experience. Yeah, I think that's awful. And you know what the other thing was? I spoke to a woman, we were talking about stillbirths going back about 2 years ago. And we said we'd try and help, and we did. We tried to contact the minister and everything at the time. But if you have a stillbirth and it doesn't take a breath, because this woman had 2 stillbirths, but one did take a breath of air. The one that took a breath got a birth certificate. The one that doesn't take a breath doesn't get a birth certificate. In other words, if it's not alive when it's born, it doesn't get a birth certificate. It's a complicated law. I understand the reason for the law, but it seems so callous. Because if that was the case, you would have to give every single miscarriage a birth certificate. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that would be very complicated in law. So I understand why it's there, but realistically, they could change the law to allow for stillbirths, particularly in those situations. Somebody else says, hi, Niall. I don't want to go on the air about this, but I had 2 miscarriages and a stillborn at 7 months. The only answer I did get from the doctor was, your body is not ready. Very stressful time, and I'm now afraid to start again. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I'm going to say this without sounding too callous and insensitive, but what's the worst that can happen? You've been through it 3 times. What's the worst that can happen? Even if it's a 50-50 shot, you could end up with a baby, and that's what you really want. So don't be afraid. As I said, I know somebody who went through something similar recently, and she was terrified during her 2nd pregnancy. Terrified. But now she has a wonderful 1-year-old. So don't be afraid. Hi, my ex and I experienced this when we were in our early... Oh, I got that one already. Hi, I don't want to go on the air about this, but I had 2 miscarriages, a stillbirth at 7 months. That's the same text again. Sorry, I do apologise. All right. So there was just the 2. They were repeated on me. A bit like my breakfast. Anyway, I got to go into the news. And after the news, are we taking more calls this, by the way? Or what do you want to do? Do you want to move on? Okay, if somebody wants to come on and talk about it, I know it's difficult for people to talk about it. I get that. Please do.